It had been years since Emma heard the flat this quiet. No footsteps above, no voices in the stairwell. Not even the usual clatter of the upstairs neighbor fumbling with his keys. Just the low hum of old radiators and the occasional creak of wood settling. A stillness that, on any other night, she might have welcomed. But tonight felt different. Her two flatmates, Sophie and Grace, had left that morning for a weekend hiking trip up north in the Highlands. Something about disconnecting from phones and city stress. Emma had politely declined. She wasn't much for mud or midges, and besides, someone had to keep an eye on the place. She liked solitude in theory. She'd planned to spend the weekend catching up on writing, reading some Shirley Jackson, and maybe finishing the creepy puzzle she'd started last autumn and never quite finished. Now, standing in the dim hallway of their second-floor flat off Dowry Road, wine glass in hand, she felt strangely like a guest in her own home. The Victorian moldings on the ceiling seemed to lean inward. The flat had always been charming in a cold, drafty kind of way. Large bay windows, dark wooden floors, and a stubborn old boiler that groaned to life like it was waking from a nightmare. Emma padded barefoot into the lounge. Outside, the wind dragged fog across the old stone buildings. Street lamps glowed amber behind wet glass. The cobbled road below was empty. She curled up on the velvet armchair near the fireplace, non-functional, like most things in the flat, and clicked play on the film she'd queued up earlier. An old Hammer horror with foghorns, lighthouses, and more atmosphere than plot. It felt fitting. A candle flickered nearby. Lavender and something else. Maybe rosemary? The wine tasted a bit like vinegar, but she drank it anyway. She was about 20 minutes into the film when she heard the first sound, a soft click. Then came the hiss. Emma turned her head slowly. The TV screen had cut to static, not buffering, not paused. Just full screen, white noise snow, like an old analog set with no signal. She blinked. That didn't make sense. This was a smart TV, streaming through Wi-Fi. There shouldn't be static. Not in 2025. She reached for the remote and tapped the power button. The screen went black. The silence rushed in behind it, heavier now. She sat there, blinking into the dark room, wondering if it had been a software glitch or maybe some kind of buffer error. Maybe the storm had knocked the signal. She got up, peeked through the curtain. It wasn't quite a storm, just steady rain and that haunting wind that moved through Edinburgh's narrow closes like it carried secrets. Shrugging it off, she headed to bed. It was already late, close to midnight, and she still had half a bottle of wine left for tomorrow. Her room was at the far end of the corridor, overlooking the back garden, where overgrown ivy curled up the stone wall like black veins. Emma changed into pajamas and plugged in her phone. She scrolled through Instagram, ignoring the flood of selfies from Sophie and Grace somewhere windswept and smug. She set the phone down and turned off the lamp. But just as her eyes began to adjust to the dark click, a distant sound, mechanical, faint. Her heart stilled. From under her closed door, she saw it, the unmistakable glow of the television in the lounge. Pale blue-white light flickering across the floorboards. Soft, shifting shadows cast along the hallway walls. The TV was on again. Static, buzzing, subtle but insistent. Emma sat up slowly, her breath caught in her throat. The radiator clunked in the wall, a sound like footsteps, but wasn't. She reached for the lamp switch, hesitated, then clicked it on. Her room flooded with light. Familiar. Safe. She opened the door and stepped out. Cold air met her bare feet as she crept down the hallway. She paused at the lounge doorway and peered in. The TV was on. The screen hissed softly, glowing with that strange digital snow. Only, it wasn't random. Not entirely. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw something in it. A dark blur. A flicker of movement? A figure? She blinked and it was gone. Emma grabbed the remote again and turned the TV off. Silence returned, but now it didn't feel like silence. It felt like something holding its breath. Back in her bedroom, she locked the door. That was new. She couldn't explain why she did it. Nothing had happened. Not really. But the lock clicked into place all the same. She lay awake long into the early hours, watching headlights slide across the ceiling, waiting for sleep to come. She didn't dream. But when she woke at 3:47 a.m., the faintest hum lingered in her ears, like a static signal trying to reach her from somewhere just out of reach. Emma woke up late the next morning, the thin Edinburgh sun filtering weakly through gray clouds. Her head was foggy, not quite hungover, but not rested either. She stared at the ceiling for a while, trying to remember if the TV incident had really happened or if she'd dreamt it. Static, flicker, that faint shape, like someone caught mid-step. No, it was real. She was sure of it. She pushed off the duvet and sat on the edge of her bed. The floorboards were freezing under her feet, the chill of the stone tenement walls seeping in no matter how high they turned the heating. She padded toward the lounge, the kettle whistling faintly in the kitchen. She must have set it to auto-boil before bed. That was normal, right? But when she stepped into the lounge, a slow unease crept back in. The TV was off. But the smell in the room had changed. Gone was the soft lavender scent of her candle. Now the air felt heavy, slightly metallic, like the air before a lightning storm. It coated the back of her tongue, a strange static taste if such a thing existed. She looked at the remote, right where she left it. She looked at the wall socket. Still plugged in. She exhaled slowly and turned away, forcing herself into the kitchen. Tea first, logic later. The day passed uneventfully, or as close to uneventful as it could for someone who kept checking over their shoulder for no reason. Emma tried to work, opened her laptop, stared at half-written paragraphs of a ghost story she was meant to finish 2 weeks ago, but her thoughts wouldn't settle. Every so often, she'd glance up at the hallway, just to make sure the lounge door was still shut. By evening, the skies had darkened again. A soft drizzle began to fall, tapping faintly on the windows like fingers. She cooked something simple, tin soup and toast, and curled up on the couch with her blanket, careful this time to not turn on the TV. She left it dark, preferring the silence. She read instead, "The Haunting of Hill House." Jackson's words curled around her like a second voice in the room, comforting in a twisted way. Until exactly 1:13 a.m., click, hiss. She was already in bed, lights off, half drifting. The sound cut through the flat like a bone snapped in a quiet room. Emma shot upright. She didn't move right away, just listened. The hum of static was louder this time, clearer, as though the volume had crept up on its own. It was impossible. She hadn't touched the TV since last night. She reached for her phone and checked the time. 1:13 a.m. on the dot. What were the odds? She slowly slipped out of bed, this time grabbing the small torch from her bedside drawer. The flat's overhead lights often flickered during storms, and she didn't feel like walking blind. The hallway was darker than it should have been. The flickering light coming from the lounge made her heart beat faster. She edged forward, careful not to make a sound. The static buzzed louder as she approached, but something else joined it. A sound like breathing. Not hers. Slow, raspy breathing. Coming from the TV. No, coming through the TV. Emma stopped just outside the lounge doorway and dared to peek inside. And the screen was glowing again. But this time it wasn't pure static. There were fragments, blurs, shapes that looked almost like people. Or no, one person, a figure tall and thin, standing in a hallway. A long dark corridor, not hers, but familiar. Then it shifted. The image distorted, flickered, and for just 1 second, she saw herself, facing away, wearing the exact pajamas she had on now. Standing in her own hallway, in real time, she gasped, and the screen snapped back to static. The breathing stopped. The lounge was suddenly empty of sound, except for the thundering in her chest. She grabbed the remote with a shaking hand and switched off the TV. Pitch dark. Back in her room, she locked the door again, sat with her back to the wall and stared at it until sunrise. She didn't sleep. Didn't even blink. And when her phone buzzed with a message from Sophie, Made it to the bothy. No signal. We'll text later. She didn't reply. She was too busy staring at her reflection in the bedroom mirror. Because for just one moment, she could have sworn it didn't move in sync. The next day, Emma didn't leave her flat. She didn't answer texts, didn't reply to her editor's increasingly firm email. She barely ate. Instead, she sat by the window with a blanket around her shoulders, watching the gray sky churn over the rooftops of Edinburgh's West End. Rain fell in thin sheets. The street below was quiet, just the occasional tram rattling past, or a bundled-up couple walking their dog, laughing about something invisible. She should have felt comforted by the normality outside. But the flat, her flat, was no longer a place of safety. It felt watched, not in the obvious open window kind of way, but something subtler, more internal, like the walls themselves had eyes or the air had memory. She hadn't dreamt what she saw last night. She knew she'd seen herself on the TV, her body, her pajamas, her hallway, as if someone had filmed her from behind and was playing it back through the static. But how? How was that possible? She checked the flat for hidden cameras, absurd as it felt. She turned over every houseplant, checked inside the smoke detector, unscrewed the corners of the bookshelf. Nothing. Just dust and screws and the echo of her own paranoia. By evening, Emma was vibrating with anxiety. She brewed tea, left the lights on, refused to let herself even look at the TV. She turned it around, screen facing the wall, as if that would help. But the thing about rituals is that they don't matter when the rules are being written by something else. The clock struck 1:13 a.m., like a blade through the silence. Click. Hiss. Her breath caught in her throat. She turned slowly toward the lounge. Even with the screen turned away, the pale glow illuminated the walls like moonlight. The static sound hissed louder tonight, sharper, as if closer to her ear. She rose, trembling, and stepped into the lounge. The screen had turned back around. That was impossible. She'd physically rotated it. And now it was facing her again, lit up. This time there was no blur. The image was clear. Emma stood frozen as she saw herself again, now inside her own kitchen. Same mug, same pajamas, same movements. The TV was playing live footage. Only, she wasn't in the kitchen now. She was in the lounge. What was it showing? Her from earlier? No, it wasn't quite her. She leaned closer. In the flickering black and white footage, the figure had her shape, her clothes, but the face was wrong, distorted. Blank in the middle, like a smudge on an old VHS tape. No eyes, just a suggestion of a face. And then it moved. The figure in the video turned slowly, jerkily, toward the screen, toward her. Emma staggered backward. The image snapped to static. The sound distorted, then fell silent. She didn't sleep that night. She pulled every plug from the wall, TV, router, lamps, even her phone charger. She lit every candle in the flat, huddled under her duvet like a child afraid of the dark. At some point, maybe 4 or 5 in the morning, she dozed off, the flickering candlelight burning shadows on her wall like dancing fingers. By the third night, she was shaking before the clock even reached midnight. She sat on the edge of her bed, hoodie zipped to her chin, torch in one hand and a kitchen knife in the other. The wine was gone. Her throat was dry. Her heart hadn't slowed since sundown. 1:13 a.m. Click. Hiss. This time she didn't get up. She stayed in her room, heart pounding, waiting. But the static didn't stop. It grew louder. Louder than before. She pressed her hands to her ears, but the sound wormed through, buzzing, snarling like angry bees in her bones. And then, knock, knock. 2 taps. From the other side of her bedroom door. Emma froze. The static sound was still playing behind it, louder than ever, but now something else had joined it. Footsteps. Soft, bare, slow, dragging across the wooden hallway floor. The doorknob turned. It was locked, but it turned anyway, back and forth, trying, testing. Emma's mouth opened in a silent scream as she gripped the knife tighter. The footsteps moved away, back down the hall. And then the TV turned off. She sat in that bed until morning, too afraid to move, too afraid to cry. Only when the sun lit the gray sky again did she finally open the door and look into the hallway. No one was there. But on the lounge wall, the TV faced her again, waiting. By the fourth morning, Emma looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Her skin was pale and blotchy, eyes rimmed red. She flinched at every noise. Radiator clunks, gulls calling outside, the neighbor's dog barking. Normal things felt infected, twisted by the silence that followed them. She needed answers, or she needed to leave. But part of her knew it wouldn't matter. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't in the flat, it was through it, as if the TV had become a doorway, a lens, a mouth. And now it knew she was watching. She made tea with trembling hands. Her fingers spilled sugar everywhere. Her laptop sat untouched. Notifications buzzed, ignored. Instead, she opened a notebook and began to write, something she hadn't done by hand in years. First event, Friday night. Static appeared for no reason. TV turned on by itself. Time, unknown, close to midnight. Second night, TV turned on at 1:13 a.m. exactly. Image of hallway. Self. Flicker of figure. Third night, image of kitchen. Not me. Wrong face turned to screen. Knocking followed. Pattern 113 each night, escalating. That number, 113. Hey, there had to be something about it. She Googled it. Scoured forums, numerology sites, paranormal subreddits. Nothing consistent. Some claimed it was a demonic mirror hour. Others said it was simply bad luck. But most of it was noise. Then she remembered. Sophie once joked about the flat's weird quirks, calling it number 13 in disguise. Their address? 113 Dowry Crescent. Not apartment 2B, not 3F. Flat 113th. She'd laughed it off back then, but now her pen hovered. Flat 113th. Time 1:13 a.m. 4 nights, 4 appearances. Was that coincidence? Or a countdown? Emma stood in front of the TV that evening and stared at it like it was a bomb. She had yanked the plug again, but deep down she knew it didn't matter. The screen still reflected her. Dim, pale, small in the vast lounge. But it didn't show her alone. At first she thought it was a trick of the light. Then she saw it, a smudge behind her in the reflection. A figure standing just over her shoulder. She spun. Nothing. She turned back. Gone. Her reflection was just her again. Just Emma, shaking, breathing too loud in a silent flat. She didn't wait for the static that night. At 1:12 a.m., she was already sitting on the couch in front of the screen. She wanted to see it come alive. She needed to know the moment it began. She placed her phone on the armrest, started recording. 1:13 a.m. Click. Hiss. It bloomed into life like it had always been there. But this time it wasn't showing the hallway. It was showing a bedroom. Her bedroom. Same curtains. Same bedding. But now the bed was empty. No Emma. She leaned forward, confused. Then, movement. A figure entered the room. The tall, distorted one. The same jerky walk. The face still blurred like old newsprint, soaked in rain. It stood at the foot of the bed, turned, looked directly at the screen. Then it leaned down towards something in the bed that wasn't there. Except, Emma's stomach turned. That was her. A still form, lying under covers. It was a pre-recording, a memory. No, worse, a plan. Suddenly on screen, the figure lifted its hand and reached outward, toward the camera, toward her. Oh, and in the lounge, Emma felt cold fingers brush the back of her neck. She screamed. The screen snapped off. She ran to the hallway light switch and flicked it on. Nothing. She grabbed her torch, clicked it. Dead. Everything was dead. Only the quiet buzz in her ears remained, the echo of the static still crawling along her skin. She locked herself in the bathroom, sat on the floor for an hour, didn't cry, she just waited for the dawn. At 6 a.m., the power returned like nothing happened. She turned on every light, boiled water, sat on the kitchen counter, knees to chest, and made a decision. She wouldn't survive another night like this. Emma spent the day pacing the flat, hands shaking around the mug of cold tea she barely touched. The nightmare wasn't just a random curse. It was a message, a trap. Something was waiting. She scoured the flat for clues, old newspapers, forgotten notes, anything that might hint at the flat's past. It was an old Victorian building, converted into flats in the 1960s. But was that all? Her fingers trembled as she dialed the Edinburgh archives. "Hello, I'm researching the history of 113 Dowry Crescent," she said, voice unsteady. The archivist was kind, but curt. "Let me check. Ah, yes, that building used to be a boarding house. In the 1920s, a Mrs. McAllister ran it." Emma's pulse quickened. "Any incidents recorded?" "Some. Neighbors complained of strange noises. A fire in 1927 destroyed part of the building. 2 guests died. One was a young woman named Clara." Clara. The name echoed in Emma's mind. She went back to the lounge and stared at the TV. Her fingers brushed the remote. It flickered to life. Static, black and white. And then, a face. A woman's face. Not distorted this time. Clear, sad. Eyes like windows into a storm. "Clara." The figure whispered, barely audible. "Help me." Emma's breath caught. The room temperature dropped. The candles she'd lit hours ago flickered, and the TV went black. That night, Emma armed herself with everything she could find: matches, candles, salt, a knife, her phone. At 1:13 a.m., the static appeared as always. But this time, Emma spoke. "Who are you?" she whispered. The TV flickered. The image changed. Clara appeared again. "Trapped." Her voice cracked like old vinyl. "Release." Emma swallowed hard. "How? What do you want?" Static hissed. Words formed on the screen. "Find the room." Emma's mind raced. A room? The flat was 1 bedroom. But what if... She checked the floorboards in the lounge, tapped the walls, listened for hollow sounds. And there, beneath a loose carpet tile, a small door. She pried it open. A narrow, dark stairwell led down. Her heart hammered, but she had no choice. She grabbed a candle and descended. The basement was cold and damp, walls lined with peeling wallpaper and old pipes. At the end of the stairwell, a wooden door cracked open. Inside, the static was alive. The walls pulsed with white noise. Emma stepped in. The door slammed shut behind her. Darkness swallowed her. She lit the candle. And there, scribbled on the wall names. Dozens of them, including hers. Emma's candle flickered, casting long shadows on the damp walls of the basement room. The stale air hung heavy, thick with dust and something older. Something waiting. Her eyes scanned the walls, and then they caught it. Carved deep into the peeling plaster, names. A long list, scratched and scrawled in what looked like dried blood. Some names were centuries old, barely legible, others more recent. And there, near the bottom, freshly carved, her name, Emma Clark. Her breath hitched. She stumbled back, the candle nearly dropping from her shaking hand. Why was her name here? What did it mean? Suddenly a whisper echoed around her, soft and sorrowful. "Help!" The voice was Clara's. Emma's heart pounded. She took a step forward. The walls began to hum, a low rhythmic static that grew louder, filling the small space until it drowned out her thoughts. She closed her eyes, trying to steady herself. When she opened them again, the names glowed faintly. And then, one by one, they began to fade. Except hers. It stayed bright, pulsing like a heartbeat. Emma realized the truth. She wasn't the first, and she wouldn't be the last. The candle's trembling flame cast grotesque shadows on the basement's cracked walls, stretching like dark fingers across the damp stone. Emma stood frozen, the air thick and suffocating, smelling of mildew and rusted iron. The only sounds were her shallow breaths, the faint drip of water somewhere distant, and beneath it all, a low vibrating hum, like the static between radio stations. Her eyes searched the plaster walls, desperate for anything that would explain the whispered pleas and the impossible terror creeping inside her. Then, there it was. Names, hundreds of them. Some scratched crudely, others etched with care. The oldest were almost faded beyond recognition, deep gouges carved by trembling hands long dead. The newest names glowed faintly in the candlelight, as if soaked into the wall itself. Emma stepped closer, her pulse hammering in her ears. She traced a finger lightly over the names, the cold plaster burning beneath her skin. Why is this here? She whispered to herself. Her gaze dropped and froze. Near the bottom, in fresh red marks, like raw scratches, was her own name, Emma Clark. Her body convulsed with a sudden chill that seemed to suck the warmth from her bones. She stumbled backward, knocking the candle over. Flames flickered dangerously close to the damp carpet, but somehow refused to catch. The low static grew louder, swelling in her ears until it filled every corner of the small room. The shadows on the walls began to shift, dancing like restless spirits. A whisper floated through the air, soft and broken. "Help me!" The voice was Clara's. Emma's heart slammed against her ribs. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her trembling hands. The room seemed to contract, the walls pressing in. The names on the wall suddenly pulsed, as if breathing. One by one, they glowed, a sickly white light blossoming from the carved letters, then flickered out, swallowed by the darkness. Except for her name. It remained glowing, a steady pulse like a heartbeat buried in stone. Emma's mind raced. The whisper came again, louder, desperate. "Help me! Trapped! Release!" The static transformed, wrapping around her like a suffocating shroud. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was presence, cold and alive. Her breath came in ragged gasps. She gripped the candle tighter, her knuckles white. Then, from the shadows, something moved. A figure. Faint, wavering, translucent. It was Clara. The woman's eyes, full of sorrow and fear, locked with Emma's. "You must end it," Clara said, her voice barely a breath. Emma's mouth went dry. "And what?" she choked. Clara's form flickered, the edges dissolving into static snow. The pattern, the cycle, the hunger. Suddenly, the walls vibrated violently. The names began to scrape deeper into plaster, as if invisible claws were gouging them anew. Emma stumbled back, banging into the door. It was locked. Panic surged. She pounded on it, screaming for help, but the only reply was that relentless, static hum that now echoed in her bones. The candle sputtered and went out. Blackness swallowed the room. Emma's last thought before the silence crushed her was this. She was trapped here, just like the others. And now so was she. Emma's lungs screamed for air as the blackness pressed against her like a living weight. The extinguished candle left her trapped in a void, broken only by the insistent hum of static that seemed to vibrate through the very walls and floor beneath her. Her hands fumbled blindly, seeking the cold metal handle of the basement door. Panic surged as it didn't budge, locked tight, no key, no escape. A chilling thought struck her. The room itself was a trap, designed to hold her just as it had held the others. The whispered voice came again. Clara's, closer now, urgent. "The cycle, the curse. You must end it. Find the source. Break the pattern." Emma's mind raced. What pattern? What curse? Her fingers brushed something on the floor, an old leather-bound book, dusty and fragile. She pulled it close and felt the weight of history in her hands. Opening it revealed yellowed pages scrawled in looping handwriting. A diary. Her heart hammered as she scanned the pages. Diary entries from Clara herself. The handwriting trembled, soaked in fear and desperation. They come at night, the whispers from the static, the hunger in the walls. I tried to run, but the house holds me. I fear I will become another name on the wall. Emma's eyes darted across the words, then paused at a drawing on the last page. A crude sketch of the basement room, with a strange symbol in the center of the floor. A circle with jagged lines radiating like broken glass. Her gaze shifted downward. The floor beneath her feet pulsed faintly. A glowing symbol. Her breath caught. The static grew louder, almost a roar now, as the walls seemed to close in. Emma's survival instincts flared. She remembered the salt in her pocket, a small pouch she always carried. Cursing her shaking hands, she scattered the salt in a rough circle around the symbol on the floor. The static hissed angrily, like a beast wounded. Then from the darkest corner of the room, a figure emerged. Not Clara. Something twisted and malformed, a shifting shadow of static and smoke. Eyes like burning coals locked on Emma. The curse, the hunger. Emma's fingers closed around the only weapon she had, a rusty knife from the stairwell. Her voice trembled, but grew fierce. I won't become a name on your wall. The entity lunged. Emma slashed blindly. The knife passed through smoke and static, but the creature recoiled with a tortured howl. The salt circle flared with white light, forcing it back. Emma stumbled, heart racing, mind reeling. How to end this? Then a thought Clara's diary mentioned breaking the pattern. She had to destroy the symbol. With trembling hands, Emma scratched the salt circle wider, disrupting the jagged lines. The static screamed, a piercing, bone-shaking wail, as the shadow writhed. The walls cracked. Light pierced the darkness. Emma felt the heavy weight lift as the door behind her creaked open. She ran. Up the stairs, into the cool Edinburgh dawn. The flat was silent now. No static. No whisper. Only the first pale light of morning filtering through lace curtains. Emma sank to the floor, exhausted but alive. Behind her, the basement's darkness retreated. But the names on the wall, were they really gone? Or just waiting for the next name to be carved? The blackness pressed in from all sides like a living thing, thick and choking. Emma's breath came shallow and fast, her hands shaking uncontrollably as she groped in the pitch-dark basement. The extinguished candle left her utterly blind. Every sound, her frantic heartbeat, the creak of ancient wood, the drip of unseen water was swallowed by a relentless, humming static that vibrated through the floor, walls, and even her bones. The stale air was heavy with the scent of mildew, rust, and something metallic old blood, or iron she couldn't tell. It was like the basement itself was breathing, waiting. Her fingers scrabbled across the cold floor until they brushed the cold, solid edge of the door. She grasped the handle and pulled nothing. Locked tight. No key. No bolt to undo. Fear twisted in her chest. The whisper floated again, low and urgent, Clara's voice like a breath against her ear. The cycle, the curse. Break it. You must break it. Emma forced herself to steady her trembling hands and mind. She scanned blindly, fingertips searching, until they touched something rough and leather-bound. A book. It felt ancient and fragile, as if it might crumble in her grip. She pulled it close and flipped it open. The pages were yellowed and brittle, filled with cramped, hurried handwriting Clara's diary. Her heart pounded as she read. They come at night, the whispers from the static. The hunger grows, gnawing at the walls, at the soul. I tried to run, but the house is alive. It won't let me leave. Soon I will become another name on the wall. Emma's breath caught at the final page. There, crudely drawn, was a sketch of the basement's floor, centered around a strange symbol, a circle jagged with cracks like shattered glass, radiating thin, sharp lines. The coldness at her feet deepened, The floor beneath her glowed faintly in the darkness, the very symbol from the diary. The static swelled into a monstrous roar, filling the room, vibrating through her chest and skull. Survival instinct ignited like fire. Her fingers darted into her pocket, pulling out a small pouch of salt, the only protection she could think of. With shaking hands, she poured the salt in a rough circle around the glowing symbol. The static hissed, like a wounded beast. From the farthest corner, a shape began to form. It was not Clara, this was darker, shifting and malformed, a creature of smoke and static. Its eyes burned like molten coals, fixed on her. Emma gripped the rusty knife she'd found earlier on the stairwell, the only weapon she had. Her voice cracked, but found strength. "I won't be your victim. I won't be a name on your wall." The creature lunged, a mass of shadow and noise. Emma slashed blindly. The blade passed through the smoky form but made it recoil with a terrible howl that shook the walls. The salt circle flared, glowing white hot, forcing the shadow back. Emma stumbled, heart pounding, breath ragged, mind reeling. She needed a way to end this. Clara's diary, the symbol, the pattern. Her hands moved quickly, disrupting the salt circle, scratching it wider and wider, breaking the jagged lines of the symbol. The static screamed in agony, a sound so sharp it seemed to pierce her very soul. The shadow writhed, twisting in the white-hot barrier of salt. Cracks spider-webbed across the walls, glowing faintly. Then a sudden, deafening silence. The basement door creaked open slowly, as if released from a long slumber. Emma bolted for the stairs, every step heavy but urgent. She burst into the cool, pale dawn of Edinburgh, gasping for air that felt sweet and pure after the suffocating dark. The flat was silent, the static gone, the oppressive weight lifted. Emma collapsed onto the floor, trembling, her mind racing. Had she truly broken the curse? Or was this only the beginning? Behind her, deep in the basement, the walls still whispered. Names carved faintly beneath layers of dust and shadow. Waiting for the next. The dawn in Edinburgh was pale and fragile, the soft light filtering through the gauzy curtains of Emma's flat. But inside her chest a storm raged. Every breath she took was shallow, haunted by the cold grip of the basement's darkness. She sat on the edge of her bed, the diary clasped in her trembling hands, the worn leather creaking softly with each movement. The words within Clara's frantic script burned into her mind. Clara trapped, desperate, lost. The night's events replayed endlessly. The suffocating blackness, the roaring static, the creature's coal-hot eyes, the salt circle's desperate glow. Emma's fingers traced the jagged symbol in the diary, the same symbol still faintly etched into her memory and her skin. The sense of relief from escaping the basement was rapidly eroding, replaced by something far worse, dread. Because the names on the wall weren't just names, they were warnings, echoes of souls caught in an endless cycle. She tried to shake it off. Maybe it was the trauma, the isolation, or the shadows playing tricks on her mind. Edinburgh was known for its fog and gloom, the ghosts of centuries past whispering through narrow cobblestone streets. But Emma could no longer ignore the creeping signs. That morning, as she brewed her tea in the tiny kitchen, she caught a flicker of movement in the corner of her eye. A shadow pale, shifting vanished when she blinked. Her phone buzzed with a message. It was from an unknown number. The pattern must not be broken. The hunger grows. Her heart slammed. She dropped the phone onto the table, the screen shattering slightly. "Who's messing with me?" she whispered, voice cracking. But there was no one to call, no one who would believe her. Over the next days, the boundary between reality and nightmare thinned. At the grocery store on Princess Street, she caught glimpses of faces in crowds pale, empty eyes staring right through her. Whispers curled around her ears. "Help us. Join us." At night, her dreams were flooded with static and the scratching of claws on plaster. Emma's reflection in the mirror blurred, flickering like a faulty TV screen. She felt watched, Tracked, trapped. Desperate, she turned back to Clara's diary, scanning for answers, for any hint of how to truly end the curse. One entry stood out, a passage smeared with tears and ink. The symbol is a lock, not just on the door, but on time itself. The basement is a prison between worlds. To break free, you must face the hunger and offer a sacrifice. But it cannot be a life. It must be something else, something precious. Emma's breath caught. What could she possibly offer? Her thoughts spiraled, panic clawing at her mind. That night, armed with the diary, a handful of salt, and trembling resolve, Emma returned to the basement. The stairs creaked beneath her feet, the air colder than before, the static low and threatening. The basement door closed behind her with a heavy thud. In the flickering candlelight, the names glowed faintly again. But this time, the glowing was uneven. Some names shone brighter, others dimmed, like a twisted heartbeat. Emma stepped to the center, where the symbol pulsed softly on the floor. She spread salt in a wider circle, then placed the diary in the center. Her voice barely a whisper, she spoke to the darkness. I offer my memories, my pain, my fear. Take them, but spare my life. The static roared, the shadow coalescing once more solid now, more monstrous. It lunged. Emma held ground, heart hammering. The salt flared and the creature screamed, a sound that echoed through her very soul. Then slowly the shadow began to unravel. Not destroyed, but dissolved. A terrible sadness filled the air. Emma felt the memories she had offered seep from her mind, the moments with her mother, her laughter with friends, the warmth of sunlight on her face all fading, slipping away like smoke. When the last trace vanished, the static stopped. The names on the wall faded, one by one. The symbol cracked and crumbled. The basement was still. Emma stumbled back upstairs, the dawn once again pale and fragile outside. But something had changed. Her memories were lighter, her soul quieter. The hunger was sated for now. But the shadows beyond the basement still waited, still whispered. And the city of Edinburgh, with its tangled streets and centuries of secrets, held more than just ghosts. Emma knew this was only the beginning. Emma's footsteps echoed softly on the worn wooden floor of her flat, but inside her mind thundered louder than any storm. The memory sacrifice had quelled the static's hunger, yet the darkness was far from defeated. She could still feel its cold breath against her skin, hear its whisper threading through the silence. Determined to understand the curse, Emma pulled on her coat and stepped out into the mist-wrapped streets of Edinburgh. The city was alive with history. Narrow alleys and crumbling stone buildings seemed to lean closer, as if whispering secrets just beyond hearing. She wandered toward the old town, where the shadows were thickest. Her destination was the National Library of Scotland, a refuge of knowledge and forgotten stories. She hoped the dusty archives might hold answers. Inside the cavernous reading room, Emma pored over old newspapers, manuscripts, and city records, piecing together fragments of a forgotten tragedy. Decades ago, the flat had belonged to a woman named Isabel Murray, a recluse rumored to have dabbled in the occult. Locals whispered about strange lights and eerie noises coming from the building. Emma's heart quickened as she uncovered mentions of a series of disappearances linked to Isabel's residence. The victims never found, their names fading like ghosts. One brittle letter caught her eye, written by Isabel herself, pleading for help, her handwriting wild and desperate. The curse feeds on sorrow, on fear, on forgotten pain. It grows with every lost soul. The basement is its heart, a prison and a gateway. Only by unearthing the past can the cycle be broken. The clock ticked loudly in the empty library. Emma closed the letter, resolve hardening. She needed to return to the flat, to confront whatever lingered in the shadows, not just for herself, but for all who had vanished. Night fell thick and cold, and the city's gas lamps flickered like dying stars. Back in her flat, Emma lit the candle and descended the basement stairs. The walls whispered her name, but this time she spoke back. I will find your story. I will end this. The static hummed lower, almost contemplative. The symbol on the floor cracked further, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. Emma's fingers found the edge of a wooden panel. With effort, she pried it open, revealing a small box. Inside lay an old locket and a bundle of letters tied with faded ribbon. The locket bore an engraving, "To my beloved Clara." Her breath caught. The letters, written in Clara's hand, told a tale of love, loss, and betrayal, a tragic romance entwined with dark magic and a desperate attempt to protect those she loved. Emma realized the curse was not just a haunting. It was a story of broken promises and shattered lives, trapped in the echoes of the old city. As the candle flickered, the basement seemed less hostile, more a shrine to forgotten pain. Emma vowed to uncover the truth, to give voice to the silent. And as the Edinburgh night deepened outside, the shadows watched, waiting to see if she could finally break the cycle. The flat was colder than ever as Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, the bundle of letters spread before her like fragile ghosts. Her fingers trembled as she untied the faded ribbon, the scent of aged paper curling into the air. The first letter was dated 1923. Clara's handwriting was elegant but uneven, as though written under duress. "My dearest Isabel, the nights grow darker, and the shadows stretch further. I fear what your meddling with the old ways may bring upon us, curses born of sorrow and wrath. But my love for you is stronger than fear itself. I will stand beside you, even if the world turns to ash." Emma's breath caught, a chill slipping down her spine. This was no ordinary haunting. This was a tragedy wrapped in love and despair. Over the following hours, she read Clara's desperate letters and Isabel's fevered replies. Isabel's family had been guardians of ancient knowledge secrets whispered in the hidden chambers beneath Edinburgh's stones. But when love crossed forbidden lines, so did fate. Together they had attempted a ritual to bind their souls, to shield each other from the cruelty of the outside world. But the ritual went wrong. Something dark had been summoned to hunger, a void that fed on sorrow and memory. The basement was not merely a prison, but a nexus between worlds, a scar on the fabric of reality. Isabel's last letter was a frantic plea. "If you find this, beware. The hunger is endless. It must be fed, or it will consume all. The salt circle protects, but only for so long. I fear the cost my soul, Clara's, and all who dwell here. Please forgive me." Emma folded the letter slowly. Her mind raced. She was more than a stranger now, she was part of their story. The candle flickered, casting dancing shadows across the walls. Suddenly, the flat silence shattered with low whisper, barely audible. "Emma!" Her heart seized. The shadows shifted. This time she didn't flee. Instead, she spoke softly. "I want to help. Tell me what to do." The darkness pulsed, revealing fleeting images. Isabel and Clara's faces, intertwined hands, the bitter tears, the twisted ritual. Emma realized the curse was fueled by unhealed pain, a love trapped in time, desperate to be freed. Her mission was clear: to find the final piece, to finish the ritual and release the souls bound beneath Edinburgh's stones. But first, she needed to understand the true nature of the hunger and what sacrifice would truly set them free. Emma's days blurred into restless nights as she hunted through the city's archives, whispered with local historians, and explored the shadowed crypts beneath Edinburgh's Old Town. The weight of Isabel and Clara's love and their tragic mistake pressed down on her like the thick stone walls of the ancient city. One late afternoon, a historian named Malcolm, his eyes sharp and wary, handed her a brittle, leather-bound tome. "This belonged to Isabel's family," he said quietly. "The final ritual's recorded here. It's not just magic, it's a promise. A sacrifice of love, not life." Back in her flat, Emma spread the tome open on her desk. The faded ink revealed a complex rite, a circle of salt, candles made from pure beeswax, and the invocation of names not of power, but of memory. The final step was cryptic. "Offer what you cherish most that the hunger may be filled and peace restored." Emma's mind spun. What did she cherish most? As night fell, she prepared the basement, spreading salt, lighting candles, and placing Clara's diary and the locket at the center. The shadows stirred as the ritual began. Emma whispered the names of Isabel and Clara, feeling their love and pain wash over her. Then she reached inside herself into the depths of her heart and offered her most precious memory. The laughter of her late grandmother, the warmth of a hand held in kindness. The hunger shrieked, a sound like tearing fabric and breaking glass. Light exploded. When the glow faded, the basement was still. The names on the walls shimmered once more, then faded, releasing their captive souls. Emma collapsed, tears streaming. She had broken the curse. Outside, the dawn broke over Edinburgh, the city waking to a new day lighter, freer. But deep beneath the stones, in the quiet dark, a faint whisper remained. Thank you. The day bled into dusk as Emma stood on the cobblestones of Edinburgh's old town, clutching the worn leather tome Malcolm had entrusted her. The ancient pages seemed to pulse with a heartbeat of their own, ink tracing spells of love, loss, and desperate hope. The city around her felt alive, not just with people, but with unseen eyes watching, waiting. Returning to the flat, Emma felt the familiar weight of silence pressing in, thick as fog rolling in from the Firth of Forth. The candlelight flickered weakly against the cracked plaster walls, shadows twitching like restless memories. She set the tome on the battered wooden table, hard hammering. The instructions were intricate, woven with symbols Emma barely understood, but the core was clear. The ritual required not just materials, but an offering from the heart, pure and true. Her fingers trembled as she laid out the circle of salt on the basement floor, a meticulous boundary between worlds. Beeswax candles, hand-rolled and scented faintly of honey and earth, formed a ring within the salt. At the center rested the locket engraved, "To my beloved Clara," and the bundle of letters she had carefully preserved. Emma's breath hitched. She was no longer an intruder in this story. She was the final piece. Lighting the candles one by one, the basement filled with golden light, casting long, wavering shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. She knelt and began to chant the names Isabel, Clara weaving their voices through the quiet night. The air thickened, a palpable presence folding around her. Suddenly, the static returned a low, desperate hum, rising like a storm. Emma's heart pounded as the shadows coalesced into a form, a silhouette of two women, blurred and shimmering, hands reaching out but never touching. Their eyes held centuries of longing and pain. The hunger, the curse, was not a mindless monster. It was a wound, raw and aching. Emma closed her eyes, reaching inward. Her most precious memory surfaced the warm laughter of her grandmother, a sanctuary of love she carried through lonely days. Whispering that memory into the circle, she let it flow outward, offering it freely. The hunger howled, a sound like shattering glass and tearing silk. Light burst forth white, blinding, pure. When the glow faded, the basement was still and silent. The shadows had lifted. Emma felt tears streaming down her face, mixing relief and sorrow. She rose slowly, stepping into the dawn-filled her flat, now somehow lighter, freer. Yet in the quiet, a soft voice echoed, "Thank you." Emma knew the story was not just about curses or hauntings. It was about love, its power to bind and to heal, even across time and death. The flat would never be the same, and neither would she. As she stepped outside, Edinburgh stretched out beneath a waking sun, ancient stones warmed by new light.